Hello and welcome to Terra Tamers Dungym Master, the simplified version. Let's start with setup. At first, we have this deck of cards. This is the Dungym Master deck. We can double-click it or control-click it to select it, press Z to shuffle, and we will see the Dungym Master that we will face at the end of our journey. Each Dungym Master card features barriers, and which terror amounts the barriers are active on, HP dice for the Dungym Master, the Dungym Master's stat dice, an attribute we will ignore in the simplified version, the Dungym debuff that will be inflicted for failing Dungym Trials, and a list of the terrors that this Dungym Master will use on their team. First things first, we will build the team of the Dungym Master. I've already selected a Spectralf from this Ancient Terror list. We've got that. We can keep going from the Wild deck, or we can look for the extras in the Ancients deck of the extras. Raptor is a starter, so Raptor is only in one of these starter decks. It's not in one of the Wild decks. We'll go ahead and pull this Ancient Raptor from here. And then I will continue on until I find the final one, Mantis Slice. So I can either continue to just double click, select this, and press Z until we get lucky and find Mantis Slice, or I can select them all, pull them over to a board, and then it should allow me to spread this out. Alright, we'll do this over here. There we go. And then we can find Mantis Slice. Here you are. Underneath our Dungym Master team, we're going to then pull out 9 skill cards from this tier 5, and then we will put 3 skills as active skills underneath each terror, and then we're going to draw another 9 cards to modify those skills, so there will be mods underneath them. And that's going to look a little bit like this. So then we can mod either, as long as these 2 numbers match, the 5s, then that will work. We could also have a 4 and a 1, or we could do like 2, 2, 1 underneath these to mod. But most importantly, we need all of one element underneath the active skill card to match the number. We would eventually get to a point where we'd have 3 active skills like this and then 3 mods underneath them. We just can't use Earth on Raptor since it is weak to Earth. An example of the elemental affinity / advantage and disadvantage, we'd go like this. Fire, strong against Earth, but weak against water. Earth, strong against air, weak against fire, and so on and so forth. And that will matter in combat. Right now, it's not going to matter too much. Now you'll notice these tokens. These will help us keep track of things. There should be 3 tokens per player and teammate, and enemy and teammates. Players will thus be able to see the end game that they should be planning to fight in order to win. Because victory occurs once you've beaten the 5th Dungym layout, and then face down the Dungym Master's team. Winning will grant you victory, or set you up to fight a player rival for the victory. But by beating the Dungym Master teams first, you will be able to get one of their terrors fully equipped with active skills and mods onto your team if you want. But that's not where players start. Players will start by either shuffling or just picking one of these Tamers. Each Tamer has synergies and an ability. The synergies are based on elements and on the type that the terrors have on the side of their card. So like here, we have an aquatic crash station. And here we have a flying celestial. Back using the middle mouse button, and see there's also these abilities at the bottom of each Tamer's card. You don't need 3 terrors to activate a synergy there. You can have both synergies active as long as you have 3 terrors that match all of these. For now in Simplified, you can either ignore this or pay attention to it. After we choose a Tamer for our team, we're going to pull them into the appropriately colored section of whichever seat that we are joining. Let's say we're the yellow player. We can put our Tamer over here. Then we need a starter Rayment, so we go to this pile. We can search for one or just draw one. I'm just going to draw one, put it under here. The Rayment gives us our Tamers stats, barriers, HP dice, stat dice, an effect, and an equipment slot. You cannot have gear and raiments that have the same equipment slot, except for one card in the game will allow you to have 2 weapons. But other than that, there should be 4 unique equipment slot items. If they are not unique, you will have to discard them at the beginning of the next day phase. The last thing we do for setup is choose one of the child age starters. So I'm going to just roll randomly. We get a Raptor. Okay, important note. We probably don't want to take Raptor because the only Raptor available in this game, the Ancient, is taken by Sungun over there. So we're going to take Hydralix instead, even though it's technically going to be weak to air. We could, get lucky and find another Terra we'd prefer in the future. Now, one other thing to note is nobody other than the yellow player or an admin should be able to interact with this container. And then other than that, gear cards will get over time, but you can have only up to 3 gear. And they'll be these horizontal cards to correspond with the Tamers. Vertical are generally related to Terras. Okay, so let's say we're done with the setup phase. We then go to the first day phase, or market and questing. In the future, if we fail a Dungym run, we could, instead of doing the market or questing phases, we could try to catch up to the current highest Dungym tier. For now, we're going to draw 1 card from the gear deck, 1 from the Rayment, 1 from skills, and 1 from terrors that corresponds to the current highest Dungym tier. Right now, since we're at tier 0 basically, we're going to just pull from tier 1 cards and the gear deck. And since this is the simplified mode, we're just going to go in order of who helped set up the game most to take a card and then go clockwise or counterclockwise, whatever you all decide. Just take a card. Now, if we took the Rayment here, because I've already got a Rayment, I'm going to discard this into the market so that some other player could use this in the future. So let's say we had 3 terrors. I would just switch terrors and put this into the market. And then in the future, and now that we have finished the market phase, we would potentially be able to quest. Now, questing will cost us time units. Time units are how we will choose who chooses cards first in the market later, and will also dictate who gets the first crack at the Dungym Master at the end. We can click F to show that we have 1 time unit because we've chosen to quest. And this means I will go to a deck that is 1 tier higher than our current completed Dungym tier. So for now, since we started at tier 1, we're going to go ahead and draw a tier 2 terror. That's my recommendation. Okay, it's a Spectralf. Interesting. So we would then be able to roll against Spectralf with its highest stat versus our highest stat, and see if we can catch it successfully without spending any more time units. If we fail the roll, we have to spend an additional 2 time units to claim Spectralf. So how does this quest roll work? We are going to choose one of our stats. Based on Spectralf's highest, we could do speed or mind. We're going to go with speed since we match that. So we would have 3 dice. Now if I wanted to, I could put Hydralix in danger of being debuffed and add a 4th die. I think I want to do that because this is important enough to me. That yes, we will try and do that. Spectralf, you'll take these 3 colorful dice at the moment. We're going to click F to roll those. Okay, 1 for 1. That's pretty good for us. Let's see what we get. Okay, good. So we're going to see who gets the highest die. Right now we already win, but if we hadn't won, we would then check against the second highest, and so on and so forth, till somebody wins a tie or a check, so to speak. Right now we win, so we don't get debuffed, which is excellent. Right now, because Spectralf is air, we would take the shock debuff. So let's just say we did lose. Well, if we lost, we would go to the status tokens down here, grab this shock one, and put it on our wonderful creature, Hydralix, over here, so that in the future, on Hydralix's rolls, its highest die would have -1 value, and if we got a second shock, it would be -2 value. Now let's say we also had a second debuff applied, like Burn. Well, with burn, that would apply to our second highest die. So we would have -1 on the second highest die, -1 on the highest at the moment, and it would continue like that for each debuff and the number of stacks on those debuffs. An important note on debuffs, you cannot debuff a terror with its same element. So Spectralf cannot be shocked, Hydralix cannot be chilled or frozen. Thankfully, we have successfully claimed Spectralf and we haven't had to spend 2 extra time units to do it. I'm going to click Shift F to return that back to normal. And now we are at the Dungym phase. So we would go over here, see our arena. We have our Tamer token at the bottom left. Another player would go to the Dungym layout deck for the tier that we are at, right click it, and click Hold. That will pull the card into the hand. Click F to flip that card, and then it's hidden from the player currently going through the dungeon. Now, because it's kind of hard to see in the hand, honestly, I recommend having the dungeon player zoom in. This might require a little bit of, hope that they will not cheat. But then you just lay it down and zoom in on the card. On the card, we see the Dungym Trials, the difficulty of scouting the dungeon at the top right, rewards that the dungeon offers, and punishments for failure on any of the trials. At the top right of every dungeon layout card is the exit towards the tester combat. Movement in the arena or dungeon is always in cardinal directions or orthogonally. We can go up, down, left, and right. We cannot go diagonally. Every movement will cost a time unit. So as we go back to our time units, we'll say on this, you'll go like this. The player controlling this will be able to, at the start of each move, you'll roll mind dice against the difficulty on the dungeon layout to see if you can perceive the row above your current row and everything beneath it. So for example, if we succeed the mind roll, we could see all of this. If we succeed from here, we could see the entire card. And then we can just play the card on the table and everybody can see it. Pablo's player currently has 2 mind dice. With the Dungym Scouting, we cannot use our terror as a helper, so we will only roll 2 mind dice against that top right difficulty. Return to the Dungym layout card, select our dice, roll them, so we get a 7. That is not above 9, so we would not have any idea of the dangers ahead, and we'd have to choose, okay, up or right. We'll go up. Okay, nothing happens. We then go back to our time units, and a time unit passes. Actually, sorry, it should have been at 1, now it's at 2. Then we just continue. Okay, I would roll again for the mind scout. We do not succeed, so do I go up or right? I'll go right this time. And now we encounter a challenge trial of difficulty 12. This is based on our stats. So encounters are against brawn, challenges against speed, traps are against mind. So we will choose our speed dice and see what we get. Okay, we have speed dice of 3, which is good. We could, in this instance of facing the trial, add our terror as a helper. And then if we did fail, we would once again gain all of the debuffs that potentially would happen for failure, also on the terror that helps. For now though, we'll just roll our 3 speed dice and see what happens. I'll select these by shift clicking. Okay, and that is enough. We have overcome the challenge, so we do not gain an extra time unit on failure, and we do not lose a die from that as well. Not written on the card, and something I should really probably think about putting on the card is that you will spend a die or lose one of your maximum dice if you fail an encounter of that type, or a trial of that type. So if we'd failed on this speed challenge, we would lose one of our speed dice until we get to our combat. That would make any further challenges that we face that are, the speed challenges, more difficult. In this instance, we have successfully made it one more step. So we're at 3 right now, thanks to our 1 questing time unit. All right. We would once again roll for mind. We fail. Not a surprise. We're going to go up and see this treasure reward. So now we would just draw from the tier 2 terror pile. And we can select all these, shuffle them, draw. Okay, we get a Scorpitox. Excellent. So then that would just be added to our team. Now we did luck out in the sense that we also got a more difficult card, but a better reward in that higher difficulty. Play would continue in this racing section as we've been doing it until we finally reached the end here. This would start the tester combat. We return our tamer back to the bottom left. We'll put in one of our terrors. For now, we'll just choose our first terror, Hydrolix here, but we could put in Spectralf or Scorpitox, and then we would go to the testers pile. In the testers, we can do exactly what we did with the Dungym Masters, select them all, then Z to shuffle, and we get a tester card. So in here we get Dr. Vogel, we have barriers, we have HP dice, we have stat dice, and all that. However, you'll notice the X's. The X's are the Dungym tier. We're at Dungym tier 1, so right now we have 1-1 for the first barrier, so this is worth 0. It is not a barrier right now. Testers at tier 1 Dungyms will have 1 child terror, so not this ancient APEC. Nope. We'll also get the 1+1 for the lowest HP die to be 2, and then 1 brawn, 1 speed, and 4 mind on Dr. Vogel. So she can be rather frightening with the current rules in the simplified version. I'm going to grab 1 tier 1 terror for her and be back. Alright, I drew an APEC child, which is kind of funny, and an earth card, so I'm actually going to keep going. We're going to shuffle until we get a non-earth card, because APEC can't use earth active skills. Alright, we'll go back here. And then we can see, once again, okay, max speed dice 2, max speed dice 1. So the Tamer will go to our turn order strip. Enemy Tamer goes last for sure, based on the maximum speed dice values. Whereas the Terror, well, that might be a little more up to chance. So let's double check our Tamer and our Terror. Speed dice, 3 on our Tamer, 1 on Hydrolix. Okay, so actually Hydrolix is going to fight Dr. Vogel for last place. Alright. Well, that's pretty clear then. So we will take 1 die for Dr. Vogel, 1 for our Terror. Roll them. Okay, so Dr. Vogel wins. So this will be the turn order for the combat. In the simplified version, anytime you would switch out a terror, they just take the same turn order spot that their teammate was on. Okay, after we get set up for combat, it's important to remember that if we had failed any challenges, we would take off any of the spent dice tokens and just pull them off, but we'd keep any debuffs that would have been on our terrors or our tamers, and that would apply to combat. So now we return to the arena. Setup with tamers in the corners, and terrors can be either way. At the start of every round, before all 4 units go in their turns, we would place 1 terrain tile per element of terrors on each team. So with this team, we get 3 terrain tiles. We get water, air, and earth. I can place those anywhere in the arena. Just remember, enemies can also spend terrain tiles to get effects from them, not just us. So I'm just gonna put these like here-ish. And then there's 1 air tile over here. We'll put that underneath our tamer. There we go. And terrain tiles add extra effects. It's now our tamer's turn. We can move 2. 1, 2. Movement is based on our maximum speed dice. And since we have not spent any speed dice at this point in the game, we should have a total of 3 movement with our tamer, whereas Hydrolix has 1 movement. So our tamer can easily reach here. We then have this tile available underneath us. Enemies cannot spend tiles underneath an opposing team, but teammates can, as long as they are adjacent to a tile, or directly cardinal to it, or orthogonal to it, however you want to say it. So we could spend Hydrolix's water tile over here with Hydrolix later, or we could even spend from here to use it. Now, why would we want to use tiles like that? Well, we can inflict extra debuff stacks of that tile's element, or if somebody is hitting us with an element that has disadvantage, then we can block their element die entirely from their active skill with it. So because Apec is using fire, if Apec shot a fire blast at our Tamer, the Tamer could spend this water tile to remove the fire damage die. Now in the simplified version, we're going to ignore the text boxes and only pay attention to what stat is being used, the level of the die, that's a D4, and whether it is melee or ranged. Any other icon, treat as melee. But in this instance, this is a melee attack, so let's say Apec got to move on its turn. At this range, it's not in melee, but it can still roll its attack. By doing so, it cannot get a critical bonus from matching dice. It would have to move in to melee range to get the critical bonus. In ranged attacks, similarly, you would have to be at range to get the critical bonus, and in melee, you cannot get the critical bonus. Let's continue Pablo's turn, our Tamer. So Pablo reaches this air tile, and can use any of his stat dice at any range to do an attack. This is something that I am considering changing in the future, but for now, that's what we've got. So Pablo could spend this air tile underneath himself to add a shock to the enemy Tamer. And I think we're going to go ahead and do that. So we'll spend this terrain tile underneath you, use the actual shock tile. So now we're going to roll our speed, which is 3 dice, against Dr. Vogel here. All right, we've rolled a 5, a 3, and a 2. The way we assign damage dice is always from top to bottom. So we would check barriers first. Right now, Dr. Vogel has no barriers. She has 1 Tamer, and at Dungeon Tier 1, it's literally a value of 0, so it just doesn't matter. Now, for her health, we can assign 3 dice. Luckily, we have rolled 2, 3, and 5. So, we can hit this first die for 2, we can hit the second die that also has a value of 2 with the 3, and the third die with a value of 3 with the 5. We cannot assign this 5 down to the final HP die. We have to go in order. We would then pull from over here, spent HP dice. Sorry, that's the bleed. This is the spent HP token. We can get 3 of these. And it's important to note, by defeating an enemy tester or player, you win. You don't have to defeat the terrors to win first. But, once again, defeating terrors removes a barrier. So you do not have to attack the barrier to remove it. You can attack the terror. In the simplified mode, there is no recharging of barriers. You would have to use an action to charge a barrier. Now, let's say I didn't attack because I realized I would rather have the elemental advantage against Apec with my Scorpitox. It would take my action to switch out Apec with Scorpitox. Scorpitox would still have its movement and action available, but my Tamer would not have its action. In the early game, it's probably better to just go for the enemy tester, especially since the enemy team does not have the same luxury of going directly for your Tamer. They are forced to attack terrors first in this simplified mode. In this instance, we're going to keep the enemy team as is in order to showcase elemental advantage, if nothing else. So after our Tamer goes, we then have Apec. Alright, so Apec is going to move at least here. Yeah, I guess here. Okay, so now Apec can go ahead and spend this Earth die if it wants to try to poison Hydralix. Now I don't see why it wouldn't do that. Our element die here with 2 speed dice and the D4 fire die. So we'll go find a D4. It's these diamond looking ones. Okay, so that's our roll. Now we are using a fire type attack against a water type, which means we have disadvantage with this attack. So we're going to roll. We can't select the D4 and the D6s. They are technically 2 different types of components. Okay, so this is actually a pretty good attack, which saddens me greatly because Hydralix has the advantage against fire by being water. So that player can choose to force us to re-roll. And since this is a very good roll, we're going to force the re-roll. Okay, so we did kind of the same roll, weirdly enough. So that's okay. But we did get a crit from it. Okay. And we're in melee, so we actually don't get the crit. Yeah, with our melee range, we cannot hit with the critical bonus. These would be worth 6 value with the doubles if we were able to crit instead of 5s. Now, if we had, say, a third die, which was also a 5, they would be each worth 7, as the bonus increases per matching die on each die. Alright, we'd apply these damages to the Terror Hydralix, and that would be the end of that. And then we would do the poison as well, and then we would continue play to the enemy Tamer. And then Dr. Vogel would roll her 4 mind dice. Probably just not even move. We'll take these 4. Roll them. Yeah, and that would pretty much KO Hydralix. Hydralix would go out. We would have to summon in our next terror. And they would get their full turn. Alright, so I flipped Hydralix over to show that it's KO'd. We would then pull out Scorpitox, most likely. Yeah. So we pull this 3 token, or one of our 3 tokens, for the 3, and summon it adjacent to our Tamer. Okay. And now it would be Scorpitox's turn. So let's say we'll go up here. Now, let's just imagine for a second that this wasn't air, this was fire, right? And Scorpitox was attacking with an earth move. At the moment, he's not, but we will assume that. We would then have our earth die and our, let's say, 2d6. So we roll all these. But, once again, you can spin that fire terrain and get rid of this entirely. So that's a much better outcome overall. That's how terrain tiles can be used defensively. By ending the entire round, by every unit taking a turn, a time unit passes. If a full round does not pass before combat ends, then we would not add a time unit. So the faster you go, the fewer time units you would incur, the better for getting to the end faster. After defeating a tester, we would then get to upgrade any one of our cards and draw 1 new gear card. So let's say we've defeated Dr. Vogel after 8 time units, then we would be able to shuffle the gear, grab 1, excellent, and then choose, okay, do we want to mature a terror? Do we want to get a better Rayment? Do we want another gear card? Things like that. For now, let's say we upgrade our Rayment to a tier 2, make our Tamer even better. And then we would also move the Dungym layout card that we ran underneath our time units to show that we have conquered that. So there we go. Underneath our yellow thing, we have the highest completed tier of Dungym. So that would end the night phase and start the next day phase. Once again, we would then see who has the highest time units in terms of who gets to pick from the market first and last. So fewest time units gets to go first, most goes last. Other than that, you just pay attention to the testers, the Dungym layout cards, until you reach the tier 5 Dungym layout, where at the end of it, you will face the Dungym Master. And whoever faces the Dungym Master first with the fewest time units wins the game. Now, one thing to consider is that you could have the table kind of separate into 2 different tables where 2 players can control the Dungym and the Dungym run at a time. You know, you could cycle which people are the 2 players. If you wanted to worry about doing it quickly, you could also go in a cycle and just, take turns all at once. Those are the basic rules for the simplified version of Terra Tamers Dungym Master. As you can see, we ignored pretty much all of the written text on all the cool abilities and traits and things, But if you're willing, after playing this simplified version, to go a little bit more hardcore on strategy, then I would recommend taking a deeper look. I hope you've enjoyed this video, dear viewer, and have a great day.